prosecution outlined how accounting practices did not.
What kind of likeness is that? If they were great artists, they'll be in a museum. I'm fucking fodder for cartoonists now.
Welcome to another episode of Gutter Boys. Gutter Boys is back with episode 33. Today we're joined by our guest, John F. Malta. He'll be joining us in the second half of the show. Until then, we're going to go ahead and cover some news because we haven't done that in a while. Cam, I'll let you go ahead and start.
Yeah, so I think the big thing is the whole Boom Studios Keanu Reeves Kickstarter that they put up, mainly because Boom is an established publisher that, you know, in theory should have enough, you know, to publish books without Kickstarter. I understand COVID happened, though, so, you know, I get why a publisher might be put in that place, but essentially what's happened is Keanu Reeves' likeness is being used for one of their comics. I think it's called Berserker, and I know that the guy who did Mind Management is writing it, Matt Kent, but Boom put it up on Kickstarter and it had over $300,000 within like the first 48 hours, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than that. Just kind of silly because like this is an incredible amount of money to, you know, make, and obviously it's off of Keanu Reeves being the draw because, I mean, I don't really see another action comic getting this much activity and, you know, money pledged towards it. Boom has been notoriously, you know, kind of shitty about paying artists, so they've got all this money when, you know, they apparently, you know, have never had the money before. So this Kickstarter was asking for a total goal of $50,000. With 5 days passed, there's still 25 to go on this thing. They have raised $606,525, which is crazy overfunded.
Yeah. And I wonder if this is going to embolden them to continue doing this even more.
I mean, you mean like use the likeness from actors and so forth?
No. Just passing the buck to the direct market. I mean, making the consumers pay for the publication of the book.
Dude, I don't think it would work. You know, I think that Keanu Reeves is like, you know, really hot right now. Probably Hollywood's last good actor. Not good actor, but like, you know, knock on wood, hasn't, you know, been canceled for anything or anything like that.
I hear he actually sucks in real life, but that's not,
really?
Who cares? Honestly, I'm not really that invested in him or other actors.
Yeah, but to me, like, I don't know, a comic raising this much money is pretty crazy. I would in like that little time, you know, there was the Scott Snyder Kickstarter that got a lot of money, but it wasn't anything like this. And I think that this is kind of like a way to get the buck from like normies that wouldn't normally go to the comic shop. You know, they're like, oh, Keanu Reeves in a comic and I can get it delivered to my doorstep. This isn't really helping comics.
I just thought it was a way for Boom to not have to invest anything.
But I mean, what was there to, I mean...
Because really all they're paying for is the likeness, right?
Right, because I mean, like, you know, the printing cost would just, you know, that's something they're used to footing the bill for. So,
no, I don't know. I think a lot of creators on Twitter have been talking about the problems with publishers like Boom using Kickstarter as a platform. I think there are a lot of ethical questions there because, yeah, like you said, if you can't foot the bill to begin with, why are you putting this up? Why are you afraid to put any risk in this? Because clearly you putting on a Kickstarter tells me that you don't think it's worth it. Or you're not that interested in investing that much into this.
Well, and I heard about this book, like, maybe...
I don't care about the book. I honestly...
Well, I just remember them talking about it. Like, I remember seeing tweets about, like, Keanu Reeves being in a comic, like, 6 months ago. So It's like, this was announced so long ago that surely some kind of deal has already been made to use his likeness before crowdfunding was even in the picture. So it's like, kind of going back to what you said, why would you make this deal if you didn't have the funds for it? But it's like, to me, I don't know, it kind of just comes off as cheap as a way to expand it.
No, it is. It's a way to pass off the buck to the consumer directly.
Yeah.
Make them be the carriers of the risk and not you, the business. So, and considering Boom's track record, this is not surprising.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. If you're listening to this, I would maybe suggest not to support that campaign. I don't know. I just think it sends a very bad precedence to other publishers like Boom that will only embolden them to continue doing shit like this.
Yeah, and I said this on our social media and everything, but, it's like, I can only hope that Boom saves some of this money and, runs their business like a business should be run and pays their, contractors good rates. They're probably not, like you said, but that would be the best case scenario out of this. But yeah.
I see zero positives in this at all, so I don't know.
Yeah, if anything, it's just going to, like you said, kind of start a trend of this happening.
I mean, it already was. And to be fair, it was happening with people that should be doing a Kickstarter, like creator-owned stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah,
but if this is not creator-owned. This is Boom's public, like they're licensing this stuff out. So imagine if, Boom tried to pass the buck off for some like Rick and Morty book, it would be just as needless and stupid. Like,
right.
No, you pay for it. You're the one that purchased the license. You fucking pay for it. But, there are tons of Keanu marks, so... I mean, whatever. The only thing I have invested in this is that it does set a bad precedence. Other than that, I don't care.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's good for the industry because, what they're doing is like, yeah, it's a Keanu Reeves comic book, but I don't really think this is going to get people interested in comics. It's just going
to get interested in Keanu, which they already are.
Right. Like the people that are getting this are buying like, the Cyberpunk video game and just really big fans of his, which, whatever, your own. But this is doing nothing for comics.
I mean, pretty much. This is just a really hokey ploy to make more money and undercut paying their creative teams. So, whatever. Just another day in comics.
Yeah. If Matt Kent does get paid off of this Kickstarter, he's looking at a pretty big bag.
I would like to think, and I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah. Next news, do you want to cover the Andrew Robinson stuff?
So, segueing into some other recent Twitter news, if you have a Twitter account or if you use Twitter and peruse any of the comics news stuff, you probably have already seen this repeatedly. So, comic artist Andrew Robinson, never heard of this guy before. I guess he did some work for DC at some point or something. Do you know what he's done?
Let me look him up real quick.
Yeah. Okay, so bottom line is we don't know. And we don't really care. But so on Twitter, he made a post supporting the Wisconsin state shooter, who is from Illinois, whose name will not be mentioned. And he basically defended the guy, saying that he was like super brave for crossing state lines and bringing a gun and yada yada, protecting freedom or fucking whatever, fighting the Antifa. And obviously people got pretty mad. So mad, in fact, that he deleted his own Twitter account, or he got kicked off. I don't know which one. And I think this also spurned because he made a comment on Instagram initially, on his Instagram handle, Space Junkies. And yeah, so that blew right back in his face for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it looks like he did Superman, some Batman and the Outsiders stuff, and Secret Six. How long do you think it'll be until we see like a video grab of this guy on Twitter, like in the video chat with Ethan Van Sciver and the Comicsgate crew?
Probably sooner rather than later. I don't know. Well, on Instagram, he said, he's hell of a lot braver than most grown men I know. He was also giving medical aid to protesters before being assaulted and defending himself. Not true, actually. That's completely made up. It doesn't take too much effort to watch all the video footage, which this guy clearly hasn't. So that's cool.
Probably read an article about what the alleged video had in it.
There you go. Comics sucks. And the people that work in it suck as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's really not much to talk about now that I think about it. It's just like dumbass nobody in comics says a stupid thing and people dunk on him. And that's it. That's the end of the news.
And he, it's good to just bring light to shitbags in comics, so, even if we have nothing really to weigh in, at least, it's known that he's a shitty person.
Yeah, I mean, whatever career he did have prior to this is pretty much gone now, I would imagine. So, I don't know.
For sure.
Who cares? I won't miss him since I didn't care about him before. So, there you go. There you have it. All right, what else? What's next? What do we got next?
We got Greg Land to talk about for doing more of the same shit.
I kind of love Greg Land.
Okay, go on.
Because think about it. This man consistently gets a bag from Marvel and DC, the big two.
Yeah. And he works on like big ass books.
Yeah. And he repeatedly gets called out for doing this. So if you don't know who Greg Land is, he is a pretty well-known artist. I think he was kind of bigger in the mid-2000s.
Yeah, like 06, 07.
Yeah, around there. Yeah. That's when he was really hitting his stride.
Didn't he do like World War Hulk or something?
I don't know. Anyway, I don't know his publishing record, and I don't care. But he's been consistently called out because he is notorious for swiping. Now, if you don't know what swiping means, it's basically taking someone else's art or taking someone else's photographs and then tracing over that and then just reusing it like it's your own. So that's what swiping is. And that's what Greg Land's meat and potatoes are. He basically just creates entire images that are cobbled together parts of other people's drawings or photos. I think he became sort of a meme in the mid 2000s because he would consistently use porn stills to be his models for all the female characters that he drew. So you would see like Wonder Woman doing the O face when she's supposed to be like surprised or scared or something. And people clearly picked up on what it was and called him out on it. And you can see like people have gathered stills from porn and then comparing it with his drawings from these pages and then laying it on top and seeing it's the exact same image. So he'll do that pretty regularly. I mean, to his credit, he's getting a little more creative with his variety of how he's swiping. So he'll just take parts of drawings that he likes and then put them together in Photoshop and then trace over that. And he's been doing that consistently for like 20 years now almost, I think. And he has a pretty consistent number of jobs coming his way. There isn't a book that's being released by Marvel or DC that doesn't have some sort of alternate cover done by him or some sort of like pin up or whatever.
And the covers are where the money's at, man.
Yeah. I understand why editors go to him because he's consistent in terms of being able to turn in his pages or whatever he's working on in a really short period of time. So they love him because he can keep to his deadlines. And obviously, if you're just tracing stuff, you're going to be able to meet your deadlines. So
yeah. Oh, speaking of like plagiarism though, did you see the Inktober stuff come out?
No.
Okay, so this was the guy. What happened is that asshole who copyrighted the term Inktober a few years back and was threatening legal action, people that were using it. He has Jake Parker was the artist that trademarked Inktober. He had some lawyers hit people with warnings for using the hashtag Inktober.
Okay, yeah, I remember this.
Yeah, so he is putting out a book that Chronicle Books is publishing, and Chronicle Books has actually postponed the release of his book because the book is called Inktober all year long, and it's just about like a how to draw book, about technique. It's like a teaching guide. Well, there was an artist and instructor named Alfonso Dunn, and he made a YouTube video that's like an hour long, and he's going through the book page by page next to a book that he put out a few years ago, and like the lessons and some of the drawings are exactly the same. So Chronicle has put Jake Parker's book on hold because they're investigating it for plagiarism. But yeah, that asshole who trademarked Inktober pretty much like copied a book, and there's like a whole hour long video. If you all want to see it, type Jake Parker plagiarized my book into YouTube and it'll come up, and it has like a very detailed breakdown, and it's just like page for page, like stolen. It's crazy.
Hell yeah.
Sorry for that tangent. That was the thing I was talking about at the beginning. I was like, I know there's some kind of news I wanted to cover.
That's amazing.
But yeah, that was it, yeah.
Okay, so Ignatz Awards is coming up. If you haven't registered to vote yet, I would recommend doing that. It's pretty easy. You just go to their website, put in your name, your email, and that's pretty much it. After that, once you are registered, you're able to vote for this year's Ignatz Awards. The list is pretty long, obviously, so we're not going to go book by book and category by category, but there's a lot of great stuff on there, obviously.
Yeah, you should vote for Andrew, what's his last name? Molto. Andrew Lorenzi's book, Molto. Vote for that one.
Yeah, I didn't vote for that. But anyway, one of the books that did get nominated for the anthology category was friend of the show Sage Coffee's anthology that I was featured in, Sweaty Palms Volume 2. Mm-hmm. So that's exciting. Congrats to Sage for being nominated. Hopefully they win. I definitely
congrats
voted.
To you too, because your work is in there. So
yeah, well, I would be able to take a little more credit if it wasn't for the fact that the anthology has like 30 other creators in it or something like that. It's a pretty big book. It's comprehensive as hell.
Was your story the reptile story?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's cool.
Yeah,
that's
it's
cool
all
comment.
auto-bio. Yeah. The entire book is all auto-bio by different creators, and I don't normally do auto-bios, so that was kind of interesting to try that out and see, what the big deal is.
Hell yeah.
And then also we have a couple of books that friends of the shows will be releasing soon. So Cam, I'll let you go ahead and get started with that.
Yeah, so friend of the show, Stranger's Fanzine, issue number 3 is out now. It actually just came out this past weekend. You all should be getting this on early in the week, so it just came out. Features interviews with Josh Baer and Richard Corbin, along with comics, reviews, and dollar bin deep dives with Keenan Marshall Keller and more. You can get issue number 3 as well as the other previous issues at strangersfanzine.bigcartel.com. I like Strangers. They feature some cool content. It's pretty cool zine. I'm already ordered number 3, and if it is good enough, I should have an article in number 4. So yeah, keep your eye out for that. Another book, actually this one I don't have any copy for, but friend of the show that was on the last episode, Pete Fakey, finally is running his promotion. So if you have not gotten his double digest, you can get that, and there is a bonus comic that comes with that. He is at the Stinkhole on Instagram. Another comic that I wanted to plug was Fortress. It's a self-published ongoing sci-fi action series created by Joel Vandernap down in Adelaide, Australia. It's about a soldier that wakes with his bionic limbs missing, and he finds that he's the target of a manhunt. The book is an indulgence in genre mayhem. Fortress issues 1 and 2 are available at romecomic.com in both print and digital formats. I actually have issue 1, and it's a beautiful book. So I'm going to order number 2 soon as well. So I would encourage you all to do that. That's romecomic.com.
Also, other friend of the show, Cash Browns.
Caroline Cash.
Instagram user Cash_Browns. They are working on a new book called In the Woods. And that's, I don't know when that's going to be available. I think relatively soon because I think it's done.
Yeah, I talked to Caroline, and we're going to have them on the show probably around the time that book comes out, just for promotional reasons. So they're going to be a guest soon. So, we'll have more with Caroline once that book does come out as well. But yeah, the images they've posted have looked fantastic.
Yes. Also, friend of the show, Eric Schneider Gutierrez, who runs Really Easy Press. His new book, Foreman General Part 1, is available right now. If you haven't checked out his work before, we really do recommend it. Foreman General is a great book. It's really well drawn and well designed, and I feel like it stands out compared to a lot of the other stuff that's currently available. But yeah, go ahead and check that stuff out. It's really good. We have some other things at Really Easy Press that are going to be coming too soon down the pipeline, so once those actually get released, we will discuss them probably in the next episode.
Yeah, Really Easy Press is the official publisher of the Gutter Boys.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah.
That and Late Comeback.
Late Comeback, yeah.
Yeah, two of our biggest supporters in terms of publishers.
Which, by the way, I get a lot of DMs. LateComebackPress.com. They just put out Shutter, which is a comic and a camera. I posted it on my Instagram. They actually have it for sale now at LateComebackPress.com, so you can go get one of those. They're really cool.
Yeah, I need to get one.
They're mystery boxes. There's like 2 different comics, and it's random which one you get because, I guess the film that they cut and put in there, you can't take it out. So there's 2 different versions.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And then also, last but not least, prior guest in front of the show, Kalani, they got a new issue of Street Dreams. Street Dreams is a hip-hop fanzine. There's a lot of great articles. I believe they come with mixtapes as well.
Yeah, featuring a lot of New York, New Jersey-based hip-hop artists.
Yeah, a lot of East Coast guys. And next issue, it's going to be hosted by Enzo Amore, if you can believe it.
Real one.
The real one, right.
The real one now, yeah.
Who is also a New Jersey native, so I guess that's how they got linked up. Yeah.
Just another way that comics and wrestling meet up, so.
Right, yeah. Well, this episode in particular is going to be a lot of wrestling talk, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So heads up, if you are not a wrestling fan of any kind, just kind of skip through the wrestling stuff. It's only 15, 20 minutes of it, but only, just a heads up about that. We don't do it often, but when we do, we go all in. So
yeah, I do want to shout out John Malta because we recorded this interview with him, I guess, a couple weeks ago at this point now, and he sent me a big package with some books and some Torture Wracked podcast merchandise in it. So shout out to John for that. That was an unexpected package, and it was really cool.
Awesome. Oh, also shout out to Tom, who we had on the show for a couple episodes back. Tom Neely. He also sent me a care package. I believe it's the same package that you got, and it's like a comprehensive
you
package.
Hold this bibliography.
Pretty much. Yeah, we pretty much got his entire output. But he also has a new book coming out soon too, as well. Now that I think about it.
Yeah. What's New, Keanu? It's strips about his dog Keanu, a Keanu that belongs in comics.
Yeah, so go ahead and check out that as well. Tom's a great dude, amazing artist, and go and support his work.
Yeah, you can pre-order that at iwilldestroyyou.com.
There you go.
So just go ahead and give us a follow on social media, and, thanks for listening. Stick around after the break. We'll be back with John Malta.
We'll be right back.
Are you ready to fight? Then step into the ring and take on Sting. There's me and my rival, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And there's the total package Lex Luger, plus more WCW wrestlers with their own ring and cage. The only place for the ultimate grudge match.
Sting flying into the ring. Watch Lex bounce off the rope. Oh no! Rick climbs the pole. Sting comes back with the body slam.
The WCW wrestlers ring and cage, you put it together. Figure so separately from Galoo. I dare anybody to take us on.
All right, listen up. This is Slick Rick here to tell you how to get the greatest wrestling video ever made. I'm talking about the very best versus the very best, all on one hot video cassette. Woo! Check this out. This is it, Daddy, the Great American Bash. You won't see it on TV ever. It's just too hot. 9 matches and 2 explosive hours from the 86 tour. Imagine the awesome chain match between Ivan and Nikita Koloff and the Road Warriors. The Boogie Woogie Man versus Shaska Watley and Paul Jones in the most bizarre and twisted haircutting match ever. And yes, the Rock and Roll Express versus the Andersons. Plus, Ron Garvin versus Tully Blanchard. Woo, and Baby Doll looking so fine finally gets her hands on that wimp, Jim Cornette. And yes, folks, the main event, yours truly, Slick Rick styling and profiling against Dusty Rhodes for the big one, the World Heavyweight Championship. Who won? Who lost? My lips are sealed. If you want to find out, get ready to order this great video cassette now.
Now, back to our program.
And we're back from our break. This is Gutter Boys. Today we're joined by artist, illustrator, comic artist, art director, John F. Malta.
What's up?
John, how you doing today?
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing well, thanks, man.
Yeah, for sure. Same here.
So we've crossed paths a couple of times now, and we obviously have a couple of pretty common interests, I would say.
Yeah, our niche interests are pretty the same. Yeah, wrestling and comics.
It's a very specific niche, but you're a busy guy. You do pretty much everything. You do commercial illustration work, you do self-published work, you do comics for other publishers, and then on top of that, you are also running your own wrestling magazine now called Torture Wracked.
And podcasting, like us.
And podcasting, that's right, because it's a joint thing, right? Yeah. Where did the idea come for the magazine / podcast, and did those kind of go hand in hand?
The magazine came before the podcast. The magazine, Torture Wracked, the magazine, started just towards the end of 2018. There's just a lot happening in wrestling that I really loved a lot and was connecting with both on like a fan level and an aesthetic level, where it's like, it was just hitting me in the right place. And I wanted to start making drawings of wrestlers. And I was writing a lot too, just about sort of like thoughts I had on wrestling, and wanted to kind of like put it all together in a zine, which is how the first Torture Wracked came together in the fall of 2018. And I had it with me sort of as like a under the table part of my display at Comic Arts Los Angeles, because my display, or the table space, was all comic stuff. But then some people knew that I had my like wrestling related things with me as well. And from doing that, that's kind of like where I met a lot of collaborators and different people that also are either photographers or artists and making content about wrestling. And then it kind of snowballed from there. Like I met all of you, I think, at Cake in 2019, at least in person for the first time. And it's been cool meeting so many different people, different artists that are exploring this sort of convergence of art and wrestling at a time where wrestling, I feel like, is as good as it's ever been.
And I think that's what's awesome about Torture Wracked. I picked up the last issue from you, and it's got a lot of your illustrations in it. You know, for anybody that hasn't, seen John's stuff, it's very distinct style-wise, and it's a really nice magazine. It was almost like a travel log in comparison to the last issues, right? Because you went went over to Japan to watch Wrestle Kingdom, and there's a lot of really cool photos from your time over in Japan. So I just wanted to kind of say that it's a really cool, slick production that it looks really nice.
Thanks. Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I wanted to explore like every detail of that trip because going to Tokyo was a bucket list thing for sure for me. And I remember in the intro to that article, it's about a 100-page article, like travel log about my experience going there and getting to meet and see so many wrestlers that I love in real life, and watching Tetsuya Naito's triumphant victory in person at Wrestle Kingdom was completely surreal. And I remember being like a little kid in the 1990s and reading like Raw magazine and different wrestling magazines that would talk about wrestlers going to Tokyo, and that was kind of like my earliest memories of like people like travel and go to other countries was like through wrestling. And since then, like since maybe like 8-9 years old, it's definitely been something that I've wanted to do, travel and watch wrestling. And this past Wrestle Kingdom seemed like the right one to go to since Liger was retiring and Naito, hopefully, at least prior to when I was booking the trip, I was hoping that Naito would win, and he did.
Right. I know that you did like a lot of like wrestling stuff over there, like checked out a lot of shops. Did you check out any comic stores while you were over there?
I went to Nakano Broadway, which is a gigantic shopping mall that's filled with niche stores that have tons of comics, tons of like old vintage toys and those kinds of things. Actually, really, because I had so many like wrestling related things to do, didn't get to check out too many and also could not find too many comic book stores in Tokyo. There's a lot of used bookstores, which I for sure hit up. But the most zines and comics I came across were within the Nakano Broadway shopping complex.
Okay, hell yeah. Was it like a lot of cool looking stuff, or was it a lot of American stuff? What was like
Definitely a lot of old Garo magazines and like very cool looking, like just like random like pop comics and stuff that just the visuals in all of them are so fun to look through. And, comics is such a great medium for that reason because, you can look at the pictures and sort of put together the story yourself from what's happening in the visuals, regardless of whether or not you could speak the language of the book you're looking at. So that was definitely a high point. Nakano Broadway specifically was a very high point of my trip for comics. And then just in terms of like visual inspiration, like pouring through stores that just have like boxes and boxes and boxes of like bright plastic toys was a dream. And even just like that place alone made the trip worth it, outside of the fact that I got to see so much wrestling and go to so many like wrestling related shops.
Yeah, what other shows did you go to besides the New Japan shows?
I went to both nights of Wrestle Kingdom and New Year Dash, and then we tried to go to a show at Korakuen Hall, but kind of like got there too late, so we weren't able to get in. But we did get to walk through Korakuen Hall, which was cool. And then we went to Todokan Shop, which again, another thing that sort of was like that was like the best reason to go to Tokyo. It's like a store that has, I know you two probably know, like that it's like just filled with magazines and toys and masks and merch. And probably my single favorite experience of all of it was finding Minoru Suzuki's shop in the basement of like a blank office complex.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Meeting him and talking to him. It was insane.
Was he there?
Yeah, it was very cool. He was there. Yeah, I took a picture with him. The pictures in the magazine. Yeah, it was really cool. He's very very both warm and intimidating.
Yeah.
His last match with the Liger, final match with Liger is a good I feel like encapsulation of his person and character, both the sort of the crying and respect and reverence to Liger, but also wanting to completely rip him apart and decimate him.
Did you ever see their MMA fight?
Yes.
It is bizarre.
I've come across that on YouTube.
MMA
it is
fight?
weird. Yeah, it's weird to see Liger in like that gear.
Liger versus Suzuki.
Was Liger in his mask?
He had a variation of his mask.
So it's like a modified mask.
Was it like a real MMA fight or like a work?
Yeah, no, it was real. It was a shoot fight.
Yeah,
he got his ass kicked.
Yeah. So, JB, listen to this. I was reading in John's magazine, and he said that all the Suzuki gun merchandise is sold by Suzuki in his shop and not at the New Japan stores.
That would make sense because his company Pile Driver, I think, is the name. They have technically ownership over the Suzuki gun brand.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that's just so sick. I love that he's just like an entrepreneur and doesn't let it cross over to New Japan. But that's cool that he runs his own shop.
And he's selling and stocking the shirts himself. It's confusing at first because they do such a like at the merch stands at the Tokyo Dome, they had like a LIJ merch stand, a Bullet Club merch stand, and everything was very featured. And you think about the importance of merch to wrestling and wrestling companies. So you would think well, why isn't anyone from Suzuki Gun represented here? But really all they had was imitation Tai Chi pants and and like that are like breakaway, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think maybe something ZSJ related, but yeah, I can't remember specifically.
Yeah, I think they'll sell like individual wrestler merch, but when it comes to Suzuki, like by himself, or if it's just Suzuki-gun branding stuff, that's all just him.
Yeah, totally.
It's pretty smart. I mean, he definitely had some foresight there, and it probably had something to do with his past working relationships with other promotions like AJPW, which apparently he has strong opinions about.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess too, he's like kind of, isn't he freelance also and not necessarily signed to them full time? I feel like I've read that quite a few times, so maybe that's also why he controls it himself.
Well, when I first started watching New Japan, like I remember like Suzuki-gun was like coming in and they were saying that like they were coming from Noah. So
So they were in Noah for like a year?
Okay. So yeah, I didn't know if they were like a cross promotional thing or what there.
Well, that was because New Japan, Bushi Road rather, technically owned Noah for a short time.
Oh, okay.
They effectively bought them out because they were doing so badly, around like the mid to late 2010s. In order to boost ticket sales, they started sending over New Japan talent over to Noah for a year. And bulk of them was Suzuki-gun. So that's why they were completely gone from the New Japan roster for an entire year.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, that was an interesting crossover because I think they did bring over some Noah people too over to New Japan for the bigger events to kind of help cross promote it. It's a weird thing. I think they technically didn't own it. It was like one of those weird Japanese business dealings things where it's like we help you, you help us kind of thing. But I think that's pretty much done now.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any kind of presence there anymore if it was happening, so.
John, I should ask this earlier. How did you get into making comics?
I've loved making comics pretty much my entire life. Probably my earliest memories of like connecting with like a larger comic artist. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally, and I grew up in Cleveland, and I used to go to this bookstore that is still there in this area called Coventry, Max Backs, and there's this comic artist which I would imagine you two know of because he's very known now, John Durf, or Durfback Durf, the dude that made the My Friend Dahmer book. He's from Cleveland, and I've came across like all of his like old comic, like his not old, but comics at the time that were either being published by indie publishers or that he was publishing at Max Backs in a very small comic section. So he was someone that I like very much connected with for a lot of different reasons when I first kind of started making my own comics in high school, and then just continued, making them as I started to discover, underground comics and those sorts of things that kind of align with like the punk scene, and from there kind of just started making comics. And I feel like I didn't make my own completed first comic until I went to grad school, and my thesis project was a complete comic, and I debuted it at the Mocha Festival in 2012, 2011.
Okay.
And that was like the first time that I feel like I really I made like a singular standalone comic. And then from then on, I've just kind of obsessively made comics and love the format so much. Love telling stories, and I love drawing. So it's sort of the perfect convergence of those things for me as an artist.
I mean, you've published a lot of comics since then, obviously. Mm-hmm. Your most recent book, I believe that's going to be available as a hardbound book?
Yeah, Charlie Cobwebs.
Yeah, Charlie Cobwebs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that. So what got you started on that story, and how long have you been working on that?
So I wrote the story a really long time ago, maybe like a year and a half ago. It was just a paragraph. So the way that I write or kind of build my comics, I'll write the idea down in my notes app on my phone. And then because they're kind of reliant on a bigger like story arc, but then most of that story is driven by the conversation, I kind of just have the notes app open. And then when the right sort of, idea strikes, I'll write out the conversation sort of as just like a conversation between the different characters that are going to be in the comic. And Charlie Cobwebs specifically, it's kind of an offshoot to a bigger world that I'm building. The follow-up to a comic called Haunted Francis, and Charlie Cobwebs is about a boy skeleton who needs to retrieve his skin in order to return back to Earth. And that was like the idea for the comic. I just thought it would be a cool sort of story arc for a skeleton to want his skin back. And then the sort of final like incident in the book would be him returning to Earth into Haunted Francis. And then, the next book, which I'm working on right now, is the second issue of Haunted Francis, which brings the two characters together into the same comic. Yeah, but the book itself, I wrote the whole thing like maybe at the start of this year and then illustrated it between January and March, thinking that I would have it at Mocha Fest this year. But because COVID happened, there was no Mocha Fest, but I've still finished it and put it out, and it's available on the Torture Wracked website now as a hardcover book, and I'll have it at the next Comic Fest whenever, that is in the far, far future.
Very cool. So Charlie Cobwebs does kind of continue the story that's found in Haunted Francis then.
Yeah, in a very small way. It's just at the end, Charlie Cobwebs comes back to Earth after retrieving his skin, and then he meets up with Haunted Francis. Like, Haunted Francis, like, he was hit by a car in, like, their reality, and he, like, wakes up, and then him and Haunted Francis are, like, talking to each other, and then it kind of leads into the next book. And Haunted Francis sort of started the same way, where I just did a drawing that was sort of loosely inspired by this villain in kind of tertiary, forgettable villain in Ninja Gaiden. Mm-hmm. There's a guy with a cloak who has a skull on his chest, and then I was just thinking that it would be an interesting idea to have this character who has a skull living on his chest that kind of ruins his life, and then the only thing that he can really find that he's good at is professional wrestling. Skull does his promos, and then the Haunted Francis, the character, is a wrestler.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, like the dialogue between the two. I read it today, actually, and it's really funny, like the interaction between Haunted Francis and the skull on his chest. And I was reading it, because the way you set up the story is like he can't find a job, so he like has to become a professional wrestler, and it kind of swerved me because I wasn't expecting the turn there. But yeah, it's a really funny book though.
And so how does the other two books, Stay Out of the Graveyard and Living Land, how do those play into this sort of larger world, if at all?
They're just kind of standalone. The Stay Out of the Graveyard, that book, I feel like most of my comics just start out with like a kind of one sentence idea. Like Stay Out of the Graveyard, I thought it would be funny to have a guy who goes to the cemetery and fights zombies to stay in shape, to get like cardio in.
Yeah.
But then like ultimately that is going to go wrong after doing it so many times. And in that comic, he eventually turns into a zombie himself and then now has to live his life as a zombie. Maybe that character will show up like within this universe just as like a secondary character. And then Living Land is just kind of I wrote it like 4 years ago and is kind of just a rumination on life and death. And it's like two characters playing a game of basketball and then talking about that.
Yes, it seems more conversational. It's just these two punks kind of hanging out.
Yep. Yeah, totally. They just kind of have a conversation while playing basketball and kind of it starts and ends. There's like a kind of definitive start and ending, but it mostly probably could have been 300 pages, or I think it's like maybe 24 or 32 pages total.
Yeah. So when you're doing these stories, do you do sort of the traditional standard format of a script and then doing the thumbs for the layouts and then kind of working your way up from there?
Yeah, and for the longest time, that's sort of pretty much exactly how I go about it. I format the text in my phone and then go to pencil sketches and sort of roughing out the idea. I guess pencil sketches now being sketches on my iPad.
Right, yeah.
And then the final line art. And that is where like the iPad stops and then I send it to my computer and color it in Photoshop. So all of like the black, white, and gray happens on my iPad Pro, and then the coloring happens in Photoshop.
So you're completely digital?
Now I am. For the longest time, I held out on it, like up until January of last year, just before I started working on Haunted Francis, actually. The Stay Out of the Graveyard and Haunted Francis are the first two fully digital books I did. Living Land is like the last comic I did that used like, I had huge sheets of like Bristol board, pen and ink. And for a long time, I like was very insistent on having original pages. And I do love that still, especially about a lot of comic artists who are insistent on not going fully digital. But I think in order to do all of the different projects that I do, it kind of just makes sense for me to be doing everything, at least comic wise and illustration wise, digitally.
Right. No, I mean, because you're pretty busy. I mean, honestly, it seems like you're always working on something. So the fact that you're coming back to comics to me shows that you really love the medium. Because I mean, you do a lot of, big freelance projects and so forth. So you have such like a distinct style, though, that runs through, all of your freelance work that I've seen you post, as well as your comics. So is it kind of weird to like shift gears when you're, working on a freelance illustration versus like a comic, like moving between the two?
Over the last maybe like 3 to 4 years, it all kind of bleeds together now, because if someone asks me to do something, they're like asking me to do it because they've seen my work and they, want that sort of aesthetic for whatever the project is. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of, things change, I guess, depending on the timeline of an illustration. Like a lot of editorial work that I do, has like a 1-day turnaround or like an afternoon to like nighttime, like to next morning turnaround. So those kinds of things, I feel like I have a sort of different mindset for than when planning out a comic or like doing like a larger like advertising project where you have a lot of time to sort of sit with things and like noodle things away and develop backgrounds and those kinds of things. But overall, sort of the drawing approach is always the same. I kind of have a line art layer that's like a micron pen that is now on my iPad, and then a graphite layer that's like the sort of texturizing layer to give it like hatching and sort of that more rough aesthetic to make it look more like it's actually being drawn on paper. And I don't know, I like obscuring that a little bit and making it at least look like it was drawn on a piece of paper, even if it isn't.
Yeah, and I think that's like, you always hear when people convert to digital that like, they do miss paper. It's like kind of funny because like the tricks that you hear, like, putting a piece of paper over it and so forth, or like, tablets trying to make like a realistic, feeling paper simulation or something like that. But I've just completely gone digital just because it's so easy as well. I mean, and you don't have as much clutter around, but, it does suck, not having the originals. But as far as being able to like take projects, with you wherever, I just think that it's such like a great thing. And I think that's why a lot more people are gravitating towards it now.
Yeah, for the longest time, I carried a scanner and a laptop in my backpack. And
oh, really? A scanner?
I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. Yeah, like a kind of like laptop size scanner.
Yeah.
So you said that you mainly do the initial drawings on your iPad, and then once that's all done, you go coloring straight into Photoshop.
Yeah, I've never liked the feeling of coloring on the iPad for some reason, and I think because I do a lot of different, like I have a big like texture library and a lot of different things saved in Photoshop that the workflow of just having the line art ready and then coloring in Photoshop just works really well.
That makes sense. And do you have like pre-made palettes that you will make in advance, or do those just kind of come to you as you make the book?
So I'll do all the line art, then bring it in and then figure out like the palette, like I'll fully color one page to sort of figure out what the palette will be. And then I'll like save that palette for the book. And I kind of do that with illustration work too, where I'll kind of go through almost like seasons of color palettes or something where for like 4 or 5 months, I'll use the same sort of swatches and then I'll kind of switch it up after it's starting to feel a little like stale, or I'm feeling like, oh, there's like so much yellow and pink in this portfolio. I feel like I need to like switch it up a little.
Yeah, because I do see it change in terms of the palette. You never stick to one specific palette, but there's still a unity to it in terms of the type of colors that you're selecting and I guess how consistent those palettes will be throughout those stories. So was that something that you just felt more comfortable with doing, or was that something you developed later down the road and felt worked for what you were doing?
I think it's because color is something I have always thought a lot about. I think that it's something that I always think about while I'm making like the comics, like what will these characters be and how will they work together. And it's, I don't know, usually kind of like I'll have 2 or 3 colors in mind and then just start building a palette around those 2 or 3 colors.
Okay, that makes sense. Cam, sorry, you had a question? I interrupted you earlier.
No, you're good. Honestly, I've already forgotten. But
okay.
It's okay. No, but I do want to kind of change gears. So, we met, like we said earlier, we met at Cake in 2019, but you actually organize your own show, the Six Sad Summer Art Book Fair. That was in Brooklyn, is that right?
Yeah, it was at Cooler Gallery in Brooklyn.
And you're planning on doing that next year, assuming the world turns back to normal?
Yeah, I mean, like 2030 or like in a decade when we're all, when everything has returned back to normal, then we'll host Six Sad Summer Art Book Fair again. Yeah, I mean, I know on our Instagram it says 2021 info coming soon, and that's like hopeful if things feel safe, like, and we can have like a social distanced, like tables are 10 feet apart, and there's half of the amount of people that would have been tabling at it book fair next summer in Brooklyn. I definitely want to do that because the space that we did it in, it's like a showroom for a flooring company that has an art gallery inside it. So the space is gigantic. So it would be, I mean, as safe as an indoor space could be during these times. But we're hoping to do it next year. And then if not next year, then, 2022, I hope that we're all tabling places sooner than that. But at the moment, it feels like 2021 is now becoming kind of like, I hope that we are tabling then.
Right, yeah. Sometime, like, I think, like, maybe the fall of 2021 is the earliest that I think we can see events happening at this point. Or that
That's what it feels like, for sure.
Yeah.
We should run a betting pool. You know, who's got 2021 and who's got 2022?
Pick the comic show that is going to happen first. Like,
yeah. Might as well make a game out of it, because we're not tabling, that's for sure.
So, well, what made you want to, book your own show? Because, me personally, it's already so stressful for me to table somewhere that I would have just, every time I'm at a show, at least once, I think about like how much of a nightmare it would be to be on the other side, like organizing things. So what made you want to take that, and that's just my perception, obviously you're able to do so. What made you want to, do your own show?
Me and my partner, Siobhan Gallagher, is also a comic artist and illustrator. And we both just thought it would be fun to have a summer art book fair and comic fair in Brooklyn, because there really isn't an opportunity. Since there is a few that are happening now, but was never really like a comic book fest that was happening in the summer in New York City that sort of was aimed at the types of comics that we all like. So we decided to sort of put something together that hit on both comic art and the convergence of illustration, design, and like products. And we asked like a specific amount of people that make a lot of different things to table at it. And a lot of them, it just were, based in Brooklyn. Some people came from out of state, and it just seemed like a fun idea to do. And we both love tabling, and our entire years are built around what fest we're going to table at. And since we spend a lot of time in the summer in New York, we thought it would be fun to put together. And that space that it happened in, the idea kind of started because the gallery director of the space suggested that we maybe consider doing something for the gallery or with the space if we were interested in doing something like that. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the idea that we came to him with, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. So with like art book fair, do you see like a lot of the people tabling there? Is it a lot of comics, or is it kind of just all art?
Yeah, it was like a mix of comic artists and then illustrators who make t-shirts and merch and products and maybe don't necessarily fit into the traditional idea of like a comic book fair, which is why we decided to call it an art book fair, because it's like it's a less specific thing, and we didn't want people to think like this is all comics. Mm-hmm. So there was like a pretty big range of people that tabled there. Adam J.K., who makes a lot of like products and pins. Good friend of mine, Cheatin' Snakes, who's a Kansas City-based sort of merch maker.
Oh yeah, I know his work.
Yeah, and he makes a lot of like cool like wrestling stuff, and he came into New York for that specifically. And then just other comic artists and illustrators that I maybe haven't necessarily seen at comic fairs also tabled at it. Yeah, so it's a pretty big range of comic makers and illustration people making merch were represented at it.
Right on. So I know that you usually kind of have a lot going on. Like we were saying, like you always seem to have something like new happening. Like, so do you have to like individualize? Like, do you keep yourself on a schedule and like keep individual days for certain projects? Like, or is it just, I know you said sometimes you even do a 1-day turnaround. So are you getting a lot of these projects on the fly? And like, cause comics are obviously, I don't want to speak for you, but comics for, us and a lot of people I talk to aren't a big money maker as opposed to, freelance jobs and so forth. Normally that's how it is. So when you balance like comics, which are somewhat like a passion project, with like commercial art, do you have to make time for comics, or do you just put comics on the back burner while you're, working through your freelance stuff?
Yeah, I always try and sort of keep a comic project going. Like comic fests in general, I feel like are what keep me making comics. And then if a like 1-day turnaround comes up, that takes the day away and I have to do that. But yeah, generally like I feel like almost look at it like MoCA happens like in April. So I try to have something new for that. And then summer comic fest, I try to have something new for that. And then fall/winter comic fest, try to have something new for that. So generally I try to have like 1 or 2 new comics for each fest, depending on how busy I end up getting with like other projects and other things that I'm working on. Schedule wise, I feel like it kind of is just all over the place. Mm-hmm. Like right now I'm working on a comic and a book pitch and some other illustration projects. So kind of a lot of stuff ongoing. And then also things that have like immediate deadlines that are completable within this week. Gonna break it up like by week. I have like a big project list to the right of me. I'm sitting at my desk right now that I'm trying to get done by the end of 2020, and then it just keeps growing. So hopefully I'll get through most of it. But yeah, it depends on what else comes up, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty relatable. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so when it comes to like, so you try to do, ideally you try to have a new book for every show. So that's like kind of funny because I feel like that's the way I keep myself on a schedule as well. It's like, hey, you know, okay, this is this show. We got to at least have something done by this. And now everything that I've read from you, though, as far as like your comics, though, because I have a couple of them that I've picked up from you at Cake and then got recently. They're pretty like, you know, self-contained. Are you planning on like reprinting like all this stuff in a bigger book sometime?
Yeah, totally. Starting with Haunted Francis and then moving forward, like the main comics I'm working on all kind of are feeding into each other and building a larger world. So
right.
I eventually would like to collect them in some way in the future in a couple of years once I have, like I'm working on another comic that's like the sister of Haunted Francis and then another comic that is all of them kind of together in the same place in the same story. And then from there, I'll kind of working on like a sort of like larger story or larger book where there's a lot of short stories involving the three sort of main characters that I'm setting up right now.
So this is going to be like your, like the world that you're building here. Now, in these pieces, though, like the lettering in them is really unique. So, like, are you going to keep that same style? Like, it got some cursive letters in it. Like, that's one thing that, you know, we were talking about. We had Kurt Ankeny on the last episode, and he's lettering a book over at Image. And a lot of the times, lettering gets, like, lost in a comic. Like, you don't really notice it. But one thing I've noticed in your work is you have, like, really nice lettering that's very unique to the books. So, like, is that something that you try to, like, you know, figure out per project? Or is that something that you're just going to like continue throughout the books to unite them?
Yeah, totally. It'll be the same throughout most of the books. The lettering, yeah, I definitely think a lot about, but will be the same throughout the entire project. It'll probably be the one like unifying thing. I mean, I guess apart from the visuals, but yeah, totally.
Yeah, very cool. I guess another thing I wanted to touch a little bit on, because this is something that I can relate to, is working on freelance or commission work for wrestlers.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that is like a domain that many people aren't familiar with, because, you know, as a viewer and a fan, we have this sort of surface level understanding of the business, right? Like it's very much kind of removed from what it actually is. And so we know these characters that we watch in, you know, in wrestle and whatnot, but obviously that's not really who those people are, right? So when you're in this situation where you have to work for them as a client and, you know, they're giving you feedback and whatnot. So what's that experience been like for you?
It's been good. You know, overall, a lot of it is just, hey, we like what you do. Can you make us something? And it kind of goes from there. Like one of the projects over the last like couple of years that definitely stands out to me as like, this is out of everything that I have done, both like commercial work wise, is the t-shirt that I did for Best Friends, who are tag team in All Elite Wrestling that wrestle on TNT for people who don't maybe follow wrestling. But yeah, that and seeing that shirt on a TV, it's like that's a project that I didn't necessarily, I don't know, it's like a project that I couldn't have imagined that I would get to do. And as a kid, it's like, oh, I love drawing and I love wrestling. I would love to do wrestling merch, but it's not a thing that I necessarily planned for or figured out like, okay, I'll take these steps. I didn't think like, oh, I'm going to make this zine and then I'll start getting asked to do wrestling merch. But It has been a cool sort of offshoot or sort of product of that zine where it's like, I feel like with a lot of it's the thing with a lot of things with like illustration and art and comics in general. It's like if you love something enough and dump enough energy into it, hopefully that other stuff follows that you're trying to get to. And that specifically, yeah, it's been great. Like Best Friends hit me up, asked me to make a t-shirt design, and I sent it to them, and they were like, "This is sick. Thanks." And that. Yeah, and then the most recent thing I've done, I did that just came out around the time we're recording this, is a t-shirt design for Chris Brooks, who has a very defined visual aesthetic, but the work that I do fits very well into his Death by Roll-Up visual aesthetic, which is like lots of monsters, zombies, really like wild graphics. That it was way more collaborative than anything that I do, because he
seems to know what he wants.
I feel like that's something that no illustrator wants to hear, but he actually like, it's like, yeah, but you're asking me to do this, but he actually like improved the design, and it was a really fun collaborative process.
Oh, that's cool.
So that shirt design, I did the illustrations and then sent them to him, and then he played around with the type and sent that to me, and we kind of went back and forth on it, the Photoshop document, until it is what it is now. So yeah, it's cool, and that experience was cool too, just in, you know, his sort of, I don't know, ability to design type and lay it around like the illustration. Yeah, it was positive. Has your experience not been as positive?
It's been mostly positive. I will say that the people that I really, really enjoy working with, I continue to do projects for them because of that reason.
Right, yeah, instead of it being like a one and done thing.
They're really, really nice. They pay. And I think, the major issue with that is that wrestling merch, contemporary wrestling merch, as we know it today, is relatively new. 15 years ago, if you wanted really good, interesting wrestling merch, you're out of luck. It just doesn't exist. But within the last 15 years, something's happened where people are now paying more attention to merch. I would say even within the last 5 years, you've seen wrestling merch actually improve by leaps and bounds compared to what was available during, say, I don't know, WWE's Ruthless Aggression era.
Yeah, totally.
But some of that 90s stuff was cool, though, I think.
The 90s stuff was cool, yeah, I agree. But a lot of that is because it just aged well.
Right.
And you know what? I wouldn't doubt that there's some Ruthless Aggression designs that you'll see 10 years from now and people will be like, oh, that's cool. Just because it has that aesthetic from that time. It is very much a product of its time. But in terms of when I think contemporary wrestling merch, I think of Chris Brooks, because he is one of those few wrestlers that really understands the importance of good quality merch. Most wrestlers don't. Yeah. It's a weird thing, but I think now more and more people are seeing this, at least in the industry, and are taking note of that and are now making that jump to kind of searching out people that actively know what they're doing in terms of designing merch and going to them to make it for them rather than, I don't know, having some fan give them a design and then they just print it on Pro Wrestling Tees.
Yeah, or just making a shirt that's just a photograph of them with their name on it, which I feel like the Ruthless Aggression era merch was a lot of that, just a photograph and a name. And there's a whole secondary, I feel community of people who make sick wrestling merch, both, for wrestlers and then on their own. It's cool, and I'm psyched that so many different people exist and are that excited about wrestling.
Yeah, it is strange to see how much... Now that you're talking about fan-made stuff, not, necessarily quote-unquote official merch, but a lot of that fan-made stuff now is far above better than, say, some stuff you could probably buy now from an official shop.
Yeah, most of the fan-made, I would say all of the fan-made stuff's better than WWE's merch.
Yeah.
And then there are there's a lot of good AEW and New Japan designs. But overall for me personally, all the fan-made stuff is the stuff that I mostly, your Hardway stuff is very sick. And I don't know, that kind of, I feel like there's just an aesthetic that everyone's tapping into, Brainbuster, Michael Watson, who JB, I know you know. Yeah, he his whole aesthetic, I just feel is very inspiring and very cool, and his output is huge. He's constantly making zines and books and stuff. So it's almost there needs to be some kind of convention for everyone. But yeah, I guess it could happen at WrestleMania weekend eventually or something.
Yeah, and I think they do stuff like that. So buddy of mine, Travis, he runs a thing called Private Hell, and so he'll sometimes have a booth at some WrestleMania event and sell merch there.
Yeah, at this WrestleCon Super Show I know happens, right? Mm-hmm, so I feel I guess that could be the place where everyone goes and does that. Yeah, totally. It's a very, very good time to be a wrestling fan, I feel.
Oh, yes, 100%. Yeah. I mean, the fact that you can watch stuff that you couldn't have had access to 20 years ago, unless you were a major tape hoarder and you were, cruising those listings and trading and actively being part of that community that was super niche and small, there was no way you were going to watch some of those older events from smaller promotions or even the larger ones too.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, we are definitely living in a sort of weird wrestling renaissance. It's interesting. And a lot of that probably has to do with promotions like New Japan coming into the picture to a broader audience outside of just Japan and bringing in more international viewers.
Yeah, I think so.
And then, of course, that lights a fire under the only game in town at the time, which, and now that it's not the only game in town, you have AEW. So, we are seeing a sort of resurgence similar to what we saw in the late 90s.
And it kind of sucks that I feel with AEW, I know that, from what I've read, they're still doing all right, but it kind of sucks that, that COVID happened for them and they weren't able to have that crowd. Because I don't know what your stance on it is, John, but, wrestling without a crowd's kind of weird to me.
I've grown to I've watched everything in the COVID era, and I've grown to be fine with it and kind of almost have forgot the crowd aspect of it.
Yeah, and if you're watching Japanese shows without a crowd, it doesn't even matter.
Right. Yeah, no, Japanese shows for sure. But I think with like AEW, a lot of those people are like new faces. And I think the crowd really helped like make them look not more legit, but look legit. But I do think like actually it was kind of funny because I think that Thunderdome thing, I saw it for the first time last night on SummerSlam. And I think it actually works more than I thought it was going to because they're like piping in crowd noise. Like it looked pretty dumb in the pictures, but like as far
it looks
as like watching
bad photographed, but yeah, the watching experience, I felt like it was way better than the shows at the Performance Center for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So like maybe, I thought that was pretty cool. I think AEW is about to start letting people back in though.
Yeah, I seen that. They posted a thing where they're like Tony Khan was mad that the pods are getting broken up. Yeah, it seems like that's bound to happen. I don't know. Yeah, it's way too soon. I would not go.
But. Yeah, that seems like a bad idea.
And they're in Florida, so I mean like
right. I'm sorry, but if Vince is the one that's like the safe one in this situation, you might want to have to rethink your strategy.
Pretty weird to have him be the one making the right moves, but
right, the voice of reason, Vince McMahon. Right.
I think AEW's test protocol is better than WWE though, or so they say. But I mean, they just let Jericho do that show at Sturgis, and then come right back to his letter and wrestle, and it's just like a bunch of bikers like without masks, just revving their engines and.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
he's about to list 101 people that just got COVID.
No, did you see what Jerry Briscoe, like somebody tweeted, there was like an article at Jericho I saw where they were saying that there was a COVID outbreak at Sturgis, and he like quote tweeted it and was like, yeah, 7 cases out of 450,000 people. And then like Gerald Briscoe replied to the tweet and said, yeah, but you're in the at-risk age group.
It's true. Yeah.
I mean, he's not a spring chicken no more.
Yeah, and Briscoe's like fucking 80 at this point probably, so it's just so funny. But
oh god. Yeah, no, people should not. I mean, if you're going to do wrestling shows with a crowd, you better be doing it outdoors. You better be having social distancing, and you better require masks.
Even the outdoor stuff I've seen, like with like GCW, like I know it's outdoor and like, but it's like standing room and everybody's still kind of huddled together in the pictures I've seen. So I don't even think that they should be letting people into wrestling shows. That's just what it looked like to me. I could be wrong on that. I haven't seen any videos, just stuff on Twitter, but it doesn't look like people are really being too safe at the shows that are happening.
Yeah. That's not good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say anything, actually.
I was going
to say, wrestling fans
are wrestlers, so, I'm probably, you guys do work for wrestlers, so I don't want to get you all in hot water for commenting on
I would say that, luckily, the people that we work with are pretty chill, and know better as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I don't see Chris Brooks running and, going into a show like that with a crowd. That just doesn't seem like something he would do on his own.
What's that weird single room where like 12 people get to watch wrestling?
Oh, in Japan.
I see Chris Brooks like posting matches there. It's like a blue mat in the floor, and it's like this super small world.
Gato Move, maybe? Is that what it's called?
Is that what that is?
I think so.
I heard the Virtual Pros talking about that, and that. Okay. I didn't know that's what that was. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've seen a Suzuki match there.
Yeah, that's fun to watch for sure.
Imagine seeing Suzuki in like that room, like a little apartment living room.
Well, I really think that's one of the major strengths that Suzuki has as a wrestler that most guys don't have. You already know he's legit, right? Like with his background, his record, the things that he's done, the promotions that he's participated in or had some hand in business-wise, he will fuck you up.
Yeah,
totally.
No joke. But then he'll also do intergender tags. He'll do matches against robots or invisible wrestlers or wrestlers that are just dummies. He doesn't really define the wrestling or differentiate the wrestling between the real stuff, quote unquote, and the, I guess, comedy, quote unquote, or even the intergender stuff, which some people still look down on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was just talking to a friend about this documentary. I don't know if it was recently released, but it's about heels, and like they talk about how Suzuki's one of the greatest heels in all of wrestling. And I feel like all those things you just said are the reason why he is one of the best heels, because he can kind of like shapeshift into those like wilder, weirder, maybe wackier shows, but then return to sort of the Suzuki that is the killing machine that we know in New Japan.
Yeah, right. You're like afraid of.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about... Well, let me go back. So I know we're going off a tangent on wrestling a lot. I'm sorry, listeners. If you're not a wrestling fan, you should have seen this coming. So I got nothing for you. So when did you start getting into wrestling in general? And then when did you start getting into sort of other promotions outside of the US?
So I've been a lifelong fan of wrestling. Some of my earliest memories definitely are about wrestling, like getting a Jake the Snake toy when I was like 3 or 4 years old, and getting Road Warrior spikes at the Richfield Coliseum in Akron, and, you know, obsessing over Bret Hart. And the early 90s to mid 90s I was born in 1987, so the sort of that era was the first era that I watched. And then of course the Attitude Era and ECW, and then I sort of fell off between about 2000, early 2000s to like maybe 2017, 2016, and just at that time, between those times, I kind of only watched like YouTube wrestling, like backyard wrestling, and kept up with like what New Jack was up to because I was obsessed with New Jack as a kid, and really only watched, there was like a wrestling promotion in New York City that fought at playgrounds, and they posted a lot of stuff to YouTube. So I watched that like until I got into like New Japan and, you know, all of the wrestlers that are in like AEW now and NXT and WWE, you know, seeing them in New Japan and seeing like YouTube videos. I think honestly tracing back, like when I did get very, very obsessed with wrestling again was when I was on YouTube and I seen a video of, I believe it was the Bucks and Kevin Steen, and I'm pretty sure they were at PWG, and they were doing like the DX crotch chop across the ring and then to like a, you know, like a corner stomp or something over and over again. And it just like kind of blew my mind that there was like wrestlers doing that kind of thing, like the sort of not steeped in nostalgia, but referencing the things that we loved as kids in wrestling. And then, you know, from there, through the Bucks and Omega and being the Elite, found New Japan and, you know, every other wrestler that I now, you know, love and obsess over.
I was kind of like the same. Like I watched it a lot when I was a kid. My first, one of my first memories were like, I remember just getting a lot of like the Galoob WCW figures. I think those were the Galoobs, like the little like rubber ones that were kind of short. Yeah, like that's just one of my first memories. I was like 2 or 3, and then I went away from it and then came back. And I think the Wrestle Kingdom where Nakamura fought, it wasn't AJ. It was when
you're thinking Kota.
Kota, yeah, it was Kota. That was like the first time I ever saw New Japan, so it was the same thing.
Oh,
like,
yeah, it's like, was that like Wrestle Kingdom 9 maybe?
That was Wrestle Kingdom 9.
Yeah, it was the first one that was like on pay-per-view, and they had Jim Ross on it commentating, I remember. But yeah, it was it was all like Bullet Club that got me into New Japan too, so I think...
Yeah, same.
Yeah, Bullet Club definitely pulled in a lot of Western viewers, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it's what they tried to do with like the NWO like in the 90s. Like I remember some of those guys coming over to WCW, but I mean, I guess it just didn't work out the way they expected.
Right, like, I just watched a match between NWO Tenzan and Yuji Nagata on, like, a random WCW on YouTube.
Dude, yeah, it's so weird, like, just the random matchups they would have, like, in WCW sometimes.
Yeah, it's like a nine-minute match on, like, a random WCW match. It's funny.
No, there was, like, a Starrcade, though, that was, like, New Japan versus WCW in the 90s. It was, like, I think Benoit might have fought Liger on the card, or, it was, like, a weird tournament thing where it was, like, New Japan versus WCW, and I've been meaning to go back and watch it. I saw some random matches from it.
There used to be a ton of interpromotional stuff in the 90s, more so than now, you know?
Yeah, like, hopefully we might see some of that in the next 5 years. Maybe.
I doubt it. Not with WWE.
Well, no, definitely not with WWE. I'm talking about everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, WWE will never. In my mind, I don't think they will ever again.
Yeah. But
I think the craziest thing that happened was when they put Liger in NXT for that one-off. Like that's the only thing that
against,
was like
Breeze, right?
Tyler Breeze, yeah.
That's like the only like sign of that happening, I think, in WWE like in the past 2 decades.
And that was just like a special first takeover, right?
I think that was a one-off thing. I think it was Liger's Liger. He wants to wrestle in WWE. He's already in the States. And Triple H is definitely not going to say no to Jushin Thunder Liger, regardless of what Vince has to say.
I think what happened there was like, I think we may have seen more of that, but like that was in like late 2015, like the fall. Mm-hmm. And then that January, WWE raided New Japan and took the Bullet Club. So like, I think there could have been like more of that, but then WWE was just like, fuck y'all. Nah. And just, you know, swooped in and just ruined any kind of relationship that would have formed there.
Yeah, which is a shame. They've, you know, I mean, and back in the 90s, you could have seen WWF and AJPW, you know, like they had these massive events that we will never see again, which is a shame.
even like letting ECW like play in that whole like invasion angle thing where they were just sitting ringside on Raw, like that would never happen.
Right,
now.
like the very first. Yeah, I don't think that would happen at all. Yeah,
that might happen again. Well, that scenario is different just because they already technically owned ECW at that point.
Right.
Well, oh yeah.
I just can't imagine. Yeah, there being. I can imagine AEW doing that with one of the smaller promotions, but I don't see that happening in WWE at all.
I really do think AEW and New Japan will eventually bury the hatchet, and I think that's what's going to send AEW over the, I don't want to say hump, but I think that if they could have like a super card once a year and like bring these guys in from New Japan for like angles like Ring of Honor did, I really think that would make AEW so much more of a viable contender. Not that they're not a viable contender, but you know, like it seems like outside of NXT, WWE tries to play that they're not worried about AEW. Outside of like the whole Wednesday Night War thing, I think if New Japan and AEW started working together, kind of like that old Ring of Honor partnership, I think that then AEW would be able to be like a really big threat. That's the only way I can see it happening at this point.
We've seen inklings of that with Impact.
Yeah. I mean,
which is weird.
Because I think Anderson and Gallows are able to wrestle in New Japan. But I mean, even with AEW, they let Moxley go over there. I mean, granted, that's like, you know, Moxley, so he can kind of do whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah.
Well, Tony Khan has said in post like match media scrums that he's like basically waiting for New Japan to give them somebody. Like I forget what the question was, but his response was, the door is open and we've been more than like, there's something about how they've been more than willing to share talent with them. So they're waiting for them to reciprocate basically, which made it seem like they would want to do like a 1 or 2 person trade off. I could definitely see that happening, especially just with Omega and Ibushi's relationship. And that match alone is like a Madison Square Garden main event match, so I could see them doing that eventually for sure.
For sure. And they even did the thing at Wrestle Kingdom this year where they actually showed Jericho's belt, and the whole angle was if Tanahashi beat him, he'd be able to challenge for the title. So, I mean,
and that was like mentioned on New Japan. Totally.
Yeah, like they did like a close-up. I remember I was watching, they did like a close-up of the belt. So I feel like they wouldn't even let him wear the belt if they didn't want to acknowledge it, you know, so. And
I think that working relationship would even work just because since Bushiroad technically owns Stardom now, and AEW's women roster is pretty small and not that experienced for the most part.
Right.
Mm-hmm. If they could get some talent from Stardom, that would be a huge get for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's the one thing, and I hate that because like the Performance Center, the NXT, and the main roster WWE women it just seems like they just like would run circles around AEW, and I hate that. So I don't know what needs to happen, like, but I do think it would be cool to like get some of that Stardom, because I don't follow Stardom, but from what I've seen of Stardom, it looks so much more crisp and tighter than AEW's women's division. So
they definitely take more. I mean, I think the big difference with AEW's roster, which the best talent they have is not AEW. Right. Like a lot of those people they absorbed from Ice Ribbon and some other promotions in Japan.
Oh yeah, right.
So they're good. They don't need anything else. But if they could bring in someone from Stardom, because they do have a mix of, you know, Japanese and also foreign wrestlers, so people from England, some American wrestlers, etc. If they can put those into the fold, that would do numbers for them, I think. Because I think that's one of the big criticisms of AEW is that as great as they're doing, offering something that's alternative to WWE, they're still not really there yet with their women's division.
Yeah, I don't know. The Deadly Draw, I feel like, did a good job of making me want to see more of each of the people that were in that tag tournament.
Oh, I forgot that was even going on. Has that been pretty good?
I feel like it's getting to a point now where it's like, there are, at least from my perspective, I recorded a wrestling podcast this morning where I talked about how fully formed their women's division, not fully formed, but it seems like their women's division is forming now with the way that the Deadly Draw was positioned. I was optimistic about that tournament, and that like I was hoping it would show us glimpses of why we should like be excited about each of the performers, and I feel like they did that with each performer that was wrestling in the Deadly Draw. So yeah, I don't know. And then just with last Saturday's Dynamite ending with Anna Jay choking out Brandy, like it just, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it's obviously not to the level that WWE's women's division is, but I feel like it will be there eventually. Yeah,
I forgot that tournament. I mean, I didn't forget the tournament was happening, but I just haven't checked any of it out. But so it's been pretty good though.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I feel like there are people that I've seen on screen all year on Dynamite that I really hadn't seen wrestle much, either on Dark or Dynamite, that wrestled in the tournament. Where I was like, wow, I want to see more of that person, like the wrestler Mel, who was in the Nightmare Collective. Like that person I kind of just was like wrote off because they were in the Nightmare Collective or not wrote off, but just didn't really care about. It's like, why do I care about this person that's now just sort of floating off in space with Dr. Luther and, I don't know, not really doing anything. But they teamed with Penelope Ford, and Mel just has this really cool power to her that reminds me a lot of Rhea Ripley. And I think that there is something there with her. And yeah, and the other people in the tournament were great too, like Tay Conte, Diamante, Ivelisse. Yeah.
Is Tay Conte, wasn't she in NXT?
She was, yeah.
Okay. I thought that name sounded familiar. Okay.
I don't know if she was part of the like big firings of COVID or if that happened before, but yeah, she was in NXT.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they have so many people in their roster at WWE. They're basically just benching people because they have too many people.
They have like enough for like a third brand.
Yeah.
Fourth, I mean,
unfortunately,
basically.
I feel like there's even like AEW's roster is substantially smaller, and I still feel like not even like you were saying, not even everybody there gets showcased. You know, it kind of sucks. Like, I don't know if, I mean, it's cool because Dark is cool, but like, I almost wish they would use Dark as like a second show to showcase like more of like the main roster. I like that they give chances to like independent wrestlers, though. I do think that's really cool. But, you know, AEW, I feel like also has that problem where, you know, because you don't even see like Kazarian and Daniels anymore. You don't see, you know, Joey Janela that often. You know, there's so many like good people on their roster that I feel like still don't get enough TV time.
Yeah, they haven't been unleashed yet.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it's, for me at least, with the first year of AEW and everything they've done, it's like almost feels like a waiting game where it's like Dark Order was like awful at the start, but now I'm like a huge fan of theirs. And I don't know. Yeah, it's just like seeing where things go and letting them breathe. And I don't know. Yeah, like I feel like the one bad thing about wrestling fan community on the internet is that everyone has every single move and strike under a microscope. So then it's like, I don't know. Yeah, a lot of stuff that maybe should get a chance gets shit on and maybe still gets a chance. I feel like one of the wrestling opinions or sort of like things that happens that annoys me a lot is like on the internet, people will shit all over something and then that thing will become good. And then everyone will backtrack and be like, oh, that person proved themselves to me. Now I am a fan of them. Where it's like, well, why didn't you just give them some time to sort of work out whatever they were working out and sort of let it breathe? Yeah, I don't know.
And that's actually what happened to Becky Lynch. You know, everybody hated Becky Lynch in NXT.
Oof.
And then there was that match where she just won everybody over.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember that river dancing bit.
Yeah, right.
That was rough.
Yeah, I feel like I can see it. Yeah, that's like etched in my memory. I see that very clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like with a lot of it, it's like, I don't know, it's easy to criticize all of it and not necessarily like think about where it's going. But I don't know. I'm excited to see what AEW does with their second show and with like Dark. In the last like 2 weeks, Dark has felt more like a real show and not just like everyone who's not on Dynamite and like squash matches against like indie wrestlers.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't feel like a pre-show now.
So are they getting are they getting technically a third show? You said AEW's second show. Are they getting like another show on TV?
Yeah, they're getting it's been a long time since I read this, but whenever they first announced it, they're getting a second show on TV on Tuesdays. Maybe the date's not decided yet.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that'll probably help them out a little bit. I mean, just because, you know, it would be cool. Because there's a lot of wrestlers there that I do like that, you know, there's just not enough time for.
Yeah, you mentioned Janela. He's definitely someone. They did like a promo with Janela and Sunny Kiss like last month. And I thought that it was going to go somewhere. And it probably is going to go somewhere, but it hasn't yet. So, yeah, Janela's someone I've been like, he's someone that I was very, very into as an indie wrestler. And I'm psyched to see like what he does. Yeah. Once he's actually like in contention for a title or maybe given a bigger, longer story arc.
Yeah, because I mean, even that match like at their first or second show that he had with Moxley, like the death match, like that was sick.
That was a good match.
Yeah, that was really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think he's like untapped. It's cool that they let him like do his thing in GCW, but I mean, you know, you've got this guy. Don't make him work somewhere else. But I don't know.
I mean, I don't actively watch AEW or WWE anymore. Mostly because of time. Not because I don't want to. Well, I don't really care to watch too much WWE anymore. I'll watch NXT every once in a while, but from what I have seen from AEW, they definitely have a lot of promise. And they are still a young company, right? Like, it's only been, 2 years now?
Not even that.
Yeah. It's been like a little under... I mean, they were established last January, so... Yeah.
Jeez, yeah, okay.
But they've only been on TV, I think, for less than a year, right?
Yes.
I would just, yeah, totally.
Yeah. So there's a lot of room there to, improve whatever it is that they're wanting to do. I think the biggest sort of hurdle that they're going to have to jump is the fact that WWE, especially over with their brand NXT, is that they're able to not only pick off talent from other promotions, but they can also farm their own, which is something AEW technically can't do because they don't have a development program in place.
I guess not, but I feel like in recent months, everyone they've brought in, like Eddie Kingston, they're bringing in some of the sickest people from the indies. And with how, I don't know, just with how many wrestlers there are now, it just seems like that sort of system that WWE has in place may long-term, I mean, it's good just for the sort of how easy it is for them to just have new talent. But then in terms of things feeling new and fresh, I was obsessed with NXT for so long, but this past takeover, this past Saturday is the first takeover I didn't watch and don't have any interest in watching. And I feel I don't know, it has this tendency of feeling sort of stale and not different. Whereas on AEW, you have someone like Eddie Kingston coming in and cutting a promo that's very real and very true to him and his work on the indies and referencing his work on the indies. I don't know. Yeah. AEW to me is everything I hoped a wrestling company in the States in 2020 would be. Bringing in sick indie wrestlers, featuring some people that maybe would not normally be featured on national TV and presenting them in a way that feels true to who they were prior to their wrestling, experience with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree that there's tons of independent talent that are untapped. That goes without saying. I think the main issue, and I never would have thought this before either, but the fact that people like, I don't know, Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair are 100% farm grown from their development program. I would have never expected that. I would have never expected anybody to come from a WWE development program to be that good, to be honest with you. But
also, they're super good, but they're also raised on that WWE style. But I guess in a way, they have to go through NXT first, which is more of an independent based style. So it's almost like you have to put on these killer matches, then you get to the main roster and you pretty much phone it in from there.
Yeah. You have someone like Satomura coming in and training with them. I mean, that's a huge, regardless of if you're indie or not, or farm grown or whatever, that kind of experience is something you cannot usually get.
Right. It's kind of crazy though. I almost feel like the Performance Center got to exist because of the second boom in wrestling. I wonder if WWE, they're always going to have the funds for a Performance Center, but I wonder if a Performance Center is going to be a feasible option after Vince dies, because it's a multi-million-dollar, because I don't know where that company's going to go once he passes away. I'm sure it goes to the stockholders and to Triple H, but it's at that point without, Vince's alpha personality, what does WWE become after that, Because Triple H seems to want to do a super indie in NXT.
Yeah. Honestly, I think if Vince were to pass tomorrow, not much would change within the next couple of months, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I know he is such a presence of that company, and he's such a weird control freak guy. He doesn't sleep. He just works constantly at that company. So that's going to be hard to replace, but I don't see them changing that dramatically. And people also kind of tend to forget that Triple H, while he does know sort of what's more in, he's more plugged into the wrestling business on an international scale and also in the independents than Vince ever was. But he also has the same sort of predatory mentality that Vince has.
But wasn't there some articles a couple of years back where he was openly discussing how he was upset with how NXT talent was being handled by Vince?
Oh, I'm sure.
So
I'm sure there's all kinds of internal stuff.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if they argue and bicker over things. I'm sure. I mean, even before Triple H came into the picture, when you had Pritchard and all these other talking heads that were kind of surrounding Vince and part of his team of people, they were constantly
Briscoe
going
and
at
Patterson
it.
and all those dudes.
Exactly. Yeah, they were always just kind of going back and forth. So I don't know. I think if Vince were to pass, I just don't see too much changing at WWE. Maybe you see one of the two shows leaning more into the NXT brand, but other than that, I don't really see anything else.
Yeah.
For the short term, at least. I don't know about long term.
Right.
I mean, Triple H has already been going into discussions with promotions in Japan because they've been working extremely slowly to develop a NXT Japan brand that just hasn't gone off the ground yet because all these promotions and all of these wrestlers and bookers and whatnot are very wary of WWE for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole process has taken, 4 or 5 plus years longer than I think people were expecting. But there's been some like rumblings of some smaller Japanese promotions that I'm not going to name that are looking to maybe resolve that for WWE. So that'll probably become a reality within the next 5 years. Yeah, I mean, like you said, I really want AEW to succeed and to kind of take WWE's place in terms of being the major promotion in the States for wrestling. But it's definitely going to be one of those things where they're going to have to work through some stuff. And that's normal. It's not even a critique or anything. That's just like standard. You're a new business.
Yeah, totally.
You're figuring it out,
Right.
And to be fair, for how less time that they've actually been around and active, they're doing pretty well. So I remain fairly optimistic. There's things I could nitpick and talk about, whatever. But yeah, I could see a lot of positive.
AEW is the only wrestling that I watch. I don't watch every Dark, but I watch every Dynamite, and I'll catch NXT sometimes. I don't really watch main roster anymore. So, I mean, overall, I did list some gripes with AEW, but overall, I do like what they're doing. It's the only wrestling product that has pretty much my 100% attention when it comes to like their main roster, not Dark necessarily, and pay-per-views that I'm keeping up with. Sadly, I haven't really been as tuned into New Japan. I watch it on Twitter, but I haven't really sat down and watched any of the events.
Well, one thing about New Japan and promotions like New Japan that have a Young Lion system, like Gaia had a sort of similar system. You take young workers, people that want to be wrestlers, and then you develop them. It's not that far removed from what NXT and their development center does, right? You're scouting for people, or they come to you and try out, which is usually the case. Mm-hmm. And then if you make the cut, then you go through that whatever their intensive training program is. Same in New Japan. If you want to enter their dojo, you got to go through their intensive program. Obviously, they handle that process differently. It's a little more traditional in New Japan in terms of like how they develop you and how they raise you as a wrestler and how you train and all that stuff. You have no gimmick. You have no nickname. You have no gear. It's all pretty standardized, which is smart. I think that's how it should be done. But I think, when AEW, it's great that they're able to get older indie talent that have been looked over for way too long, like Eddie Kingston, because he's like a killer on the mic. He's a really good wrestler. There's very few guys that can do what he does as well as he does. But the other problem is like what? He's like in his early 40s, right? Mid 40s, maybe?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and like you're only going to be able to really utilize him in any meaningful way for maybe 4 years, 5 years tops. And then what after that, right? Like who's going to be able to fill that slot? And that's where that development system comes into play. So I don't know, maybe they will have something similar to that, or maybe they'll just do the Young Lions program with New Japan, and that way they can just trade young talent to develop them. That'd be cool. But
totally, yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea if they have any plans like that, other than just picking off the random young indie talent that just happens to come across their table.
We should probably move back to comics, because I think we probably lost.
You're listening to Gutter Boys. This is a wrestling podcast now.
No, but it's great because, like, wrestling comes up on every episode. We don't really have, like Ramon was into wrestling. Dylan was into wrestling. But I mean, like, a lot of people we talk to.
Yewan,
yeah. A lot of the people we talk to, we don't get to talk like this. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John.
Yeah, sorry.
Dude, I'm always down to talk about wrestling, for sure.
Yeah, you just got done talking about wrestling, and now you're on a comics podcast talking about wrestling.
Entering the third hour of talking about wrestling for today.
Yeah, I guess we should get back on topic or whatever.
Do you want to move to questions?
Yes, let's get into some listener questions.
Yeah, so as always, if you have any questions for the show, you can email us at gutterboyspodcast@gmail.com. We also have a new Instagram account at gutterboyspod. We're at the same place on Twitter. You can look for posts on there, and then we'll also put in our story where you can send questions for guests or for JB and I. John, we did get a couple questions specifically for you. A couple of these we can group together because we got a couple of like similar questions here. And yeah, so user Sad Boy Angry Man, Frank, as well as Geometry Poppy, a friend of mine named Javier, both asked about your coloring. They want to know, how do you choose your colors from piece to piece? And they both complimented your color palette selection as well.
Thanks to both of them for the color compliment. Yeah, I feel like my color palettes and inspiration definitely comes from a lot of like my own visual inspirations, like I have a big shelf of like old toys to the left of me right now, and a lot of like old toy packaging I collect, and specifically kind of like bootleg and off-brand toys I really love. And many of my color palettes are extrapolated from those sorts of things. Like if you look at the old, and this is not a bootleg toy, but if you look at the old Mattel Simpsons line, like their initial line has like white packaging, yellow, blue sort of like colors. That line specifically inspired the coloring in Haunted Francis. So yeah, I kind of have piles and piles of old magazines and VHS tapes and action figures and toys and stuff. And that's for sure where my color palettes funnel from, and have pretty much always funneled from.
That's interesting that you bring up bootleg and knockoff toys, because I definitely get that vibe from your color palettes, because I collect a lot of bootleg and knockoff toys. They have some of the wildest color selections on those things.
Yeah, totally. Like a lot of times it's like just the coloring either doesn't make sense or is so like loud and wild that you wouldn't think to put it together, and someone who maybe doesn't even have an art background probably put it together, especially in terms of like a lot of the like department store knockoff toys from the 90s specifically have a lot of really good weird color palettes.
Yes, definitely. I'm gonna have to talk to you off air about that more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty. Next question came from previous guest in front of the show, Yewan Kwan. Yewan asked, you've done so many amazing collaborations with so many cool wrestlers. Which one is your personal favorite?
I guess I kind of answered that earlier, but the Best Friends collaboration, I think just in terms of like what it means to me as like a wrestling fan to see my work in wrestling show, and then maybe secondarily the flag that I worked on with Effie. It's cool to see that pop up. It's like a 3 foot by 5 foot flag, and it's cool to be watching GCW and to see someone like in the crowd holding that flag.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wild to like work on these projects and see them pop up on this thing that I watch for fun that I love. It's definitely a dream for sure.
Hell yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and it is kind of crazy because every time I watch Dynamite and I see your shirt, it's always like, yeah, that's John's stuff. So, it's pretty cool, as a fan, like kind of like knowing, because a lot of the times, you look at t-shirts, you're like, that's a cool shirt. But it's like, oh, I know, I've met the person that made that shirt. Alrighty. So the next question comes from Mike Prezzato. If COVID happened in The Sopranos, who wears a mask and who doesn't?
Oh, here we go.
I love this question so much. I seen you post it on Insta story, and while me and my girlfriend had dinner tonight, we talked about it because we both love The Sopranos.
Yeah, I already have my answers here. So, because I've been thinking about this for a couple days. I think that Tony would be anti-mask, but Melfi would talk to him about the importance of wearing a mask and ask him to try it. So he would kind of try it, but not at the bada bing. Like he would like take it off before he comes in, but I could see him like wearing it out in public as like an exercise from his therapist. And
that's close to what we said, where we felt like Tony at first would be like, fuck that, I'm not wearing a mask. But then eventually he would come around to wearing a mask. I like the Melfi detail, though. That's one we did not talk about.
Yeah. Well, because his whole family would probably be wearing masks and be like, Dad, you got to wear a mask.
Yeah, Carmela and the kids would all wear masks like immediately.
AJ would refuse.
You think AJ would refuse?
He would refuse. He would do it, but he would hate doing it.
Season 6 AJ, like when he was going off on the deep end into politics.
Oh, yeah. That AJ definitely would. Yeah, you're right. Rebellious
but he contradicted
AJ,
himself a lot during that season, too.
Yeah, that's true. He was just trying to find his identity.
Yeah.
I think the only one who would be, like, completely anti-mask is Paulie. I could not see Paulie wearing a mask.
Chrissy?
No.
Chrissy
being... I thought about this, and I thought Chrissy might be anti-mask, but then he would go to L.A. and see everybody doing it, and he'd be like, it's different out there, Tone. Like, he would come back from L.A. wearing the mask, and Tone would be like, what the fuck are you wearing?
In my mind, Syl would wear a mask, and Paulie would not.
Yeah, that
but they'd be in the same car
yeah.
together.
Yes, yeah. And Syl would just be like, yeah, you got to wear a mask. What do you mean? Like, we're wearing masks. You got to do
it. I don't see Ralphie wearing a mask. Yeah, I don't see Ralphie wearing a mask. That's the only one.
Bobby definitely wears a mask.
Yeah, Bobby would for sure wear a mask. Bobby, it would have a train on it. Definitely have some
Janice
trains
might
on
be
it.
on the fence. I could see Janice being on the fence about it.
Yeah, for sure. So we did get another Sopranos question from Maddie. Maddie asked a two-parter for us here. What Sopranos characters would make the best wrestlers? And in Dragon Ball Z, when the dudes go Super Saiyan, do their hogs get bigger? I'm just gonna think that everything stays proportionate when you go Super Saiyan. So
do your
the hogs
pubes
would
turn
definitely
gold?
get bigger. Yeah, they just light up on fire. I guess I don't.
Yeah, I think your pubes would go gold.
Yeah.
That's pretty sick.
As far as like Sopranos wrestlers, you could put like Bobby under a mask and he could be like a Golga type from the Oddities. I don't know if you remember them.
Oh my god, totally. Yeah, John replacing John Tenta.
Yeah, and put instead of a Cartman
shirt,
you put him in a Thomas the Tank Engine shirt.
I feel like almost every one of the Sopranos characters would make a better manager than a wrestler.
They could all cut promos.
Paulie, amazing manager.
Yeah. Straight up. Paulie's got like the Freddie Blassie vibe, like old man, heel Freddie Blassie vibe.
Yeah. Shaking his finger at the opponent.
Yeah, like he definitely would like, stand up on the ring and distract the ref, and like get into a shouting match with them.
Oh, absolutely.
Tony I could see in some like old school, like Mid-South wrestling promotion. I don't know about present day wrestling. He seems like more of a like valet.
Yeah, he has the build for it.
Didn't the Sandman get his eye burned out with a cigarette? I know he went blind somehow. Wasn't it a cigarette? I could just see Tony like, doing an old school angle where he like burned somebody's eyes with a cigar.
The Sopranos as FBI in ECW.
Oh, yeah.
I could see Ralphie being an ECW wrestler.
Yes. Oh my god, totally.
Yeah, for sure.
Zubaz.
And he only does intergender wrestling.
Yeah, he would have like some sort of Spartacus gimmick.
Yeah.
Chrissy would just like lose every match but win by a roll-up occasionally.
I feel like there's some elements of the FBI and ECW that there's some Chrissy energy going on.
Yeah, he would slot into their faction very well, I think, out of anyone in The Sopranos.
Yes, 100%.
Like, what character from The Sopranos would be like the Vince McMahon, like the head promoter?
That's a good question.
Would it be like Johnny Sack?
No, I would probably...
Sil would be a responsible promoter.
Sil knows how to run a business.
Yeah, he would be a responsible one, but like...
He's, in my mind, maybe more of a general manager, like
talent relations.
Like on-screen general manager. I don't know, who's like the bombastic... Tony, I guess, but that's not... I don't know,
The Russian.
Yeah. Oh, Hesh. Hesh would be pretty chill to work for.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Hesh would be a good promoter.
Yeah. All right, what were you going to ask, though? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I did not know this when I was watching ECW, but so in the FBI, there's a wrestler, I think his real name is like James Maritato, I want to say, but his ring name was Little Guido.
Right.
Yeah,
and,
okay.
He's kind of like the Napoleon complex, small guy, talks a lot of shit, whatever. But he's actually the only ECW guy that has real MMA experience. He used to work for a shoot promotion.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I heard Little
fighter.
Guido was like a hard ass. Like, you didn't want to fuck with Little Guido.
Yep. Well, there you go.
Like, I heard, like, back in the day, like, I guess this is like ruthless aggression, but I heard that you didn't want to fuck with, like, Hardcore Holly, Bradshaw, or Little Guido. But I guess Bradshaw got knocked out by Joey Styles, so I don't know how credible that one was, but that was all from, I read Hardcore Holly's book. And Steve Blackman was someone else that he mentioned. He said that Blackman punked out Bradshaw at the airport once, and it was sick. Because, like, apparently, like, Bradshaw was, like, trying to, like, rib him all the time. I don't recall exactly what it was, but Steve Blackman told him to quit fucking with him, and then Bradshaw just fucked with him, and he almost, like, whooped his ass in the airport.
Oh, yeah, I've read that, too, at some point. I don't remember the details of it, though.
Yeah, I'll have to reread. I read that book like 5 years ago, so my memory of it's pretty hazy.
Oh, the promotion that Little Guido was in was actually UWFI, which was the same shoot promotion that our buddy Minoru Suzuki was in.
Oh, okay.
Small world. Going full circle.
Alrighty, so that about does it for questions. John, we definitely appreciate you coming by and talking about your art and, more importantly, entertaining us with Wrestling Chat. But where can people find you online?
You could follow me everywhere at John F. Malta, and you can follow, if you're interested in what I'm doing wrestling related, you could follow at Torture Wracked on Instagram, or go to torturewracked.com to read most of the articles that are in the magazines. And then that's similarly, the podcast as well is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you find podcasts, pretty much.
Hell yeah.
All right, well, that does it for this episode. We want to thank John again for joining us on this episode today. We are a little backlogged, so you probably won't hear this for roughly a month, but stay tuned for that. And also, if you have questions, comments, concerns, what have you, please send us an email at gutterboyspodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We now have a Instagram account at gutterboyspod for both of those platforms. And then, of course, you can follow me and Cam on Twitter and Instagram as well. I am at Mortcrimp Jr. Cam is at Cam Del Rosario. So that'll be it. And until next time, stay gutter.